What is Hatha Yoga? You've heard the term, and I'm sure you've seen classes that are on schedules at yoga studios that are called Hatha Yoga. What does the word actually mean, and what kind of class can you expect if you sign up for a class that is called Hatha Yoga? And is Hatha Yoga different than, for example, Vinyasa Yoga or Yin Yoga or a breathwork class or meditation? These are the questions that I'll answer in this video. First of all, let's discuss how the pronunciation of the word is. In Sanskrit, as far as I'm aware, there is no th sound like we have when we see the letters th. Th. Instead, the H that we know in the English alphabet typically represents an aspirational, breathy type of sound that we actually don't have in English, but that Sanskrit has a lot of, and it's a type of sound. So when you see the English letters T and H together, the H is usually a breath, like Hatha Yoga. And if you look at the diacritical marks, according to the International Alphabet of Sanskrit Transliteration, or IAST, which you can find online easily, there's an accepted method of transliterating Sanskrit sounds into Roman or English characters with diacritical marks. So diacritic marks could be a macron, which is a line over certain vowels. It could be an underdot, could be a tilde, and a few others. Most of the time when we have the letters T and H together representing a Sanskrit word, there will be an underdot under the T. And to see an example of that, if you have a copy of the book that I co-wrote, The Ancient Wisdom for a New Age book, we have a very short and simple Sanskrit pronunciation guide in the back starting on page 336. And we have different T sounds, and one of which is the TH, and the TH sound with the underdot under the T signifying a hard T sound, pronounced more or less hatha, hatha. Now, of course, in English, we don't normally speak that way, and so it's usually very acceptable just to say Hatha Yoga, but if you listen to a Sanskrit speaker or a Hindi or someone from India or Bangladesh, they would most likely say Hatha Yoga. So that's how to pronounce it. Now, where does the word come from and what does it mean? Let's talk about the etymology of it. Hatha is actually a compound word, ha and ta. Most of us who are familiar with yogic things know the Sanskrit word for sun and moon, and it's not ha and ta, but ha and ta refer to the esoteric or inner qualities of the sun and moon. Instead of Surya being sun and Chandra being moon, Ha and Ta relate to the relationship of the forces that the sun and moon represent. So the positive, outgoing, strength-based, proactive force of the sun, and the negative, softer, inward motion, passive-based energy of the moon is referred to as Ta. So Ha and Ta create a relationship between forces, between resistances, between opposites. Why is that word used for a particular type of yoga? Well, that answer will shine light on what the word actually means. In the world of yoga philosophy and yoga practice, Hatha Yoga is any yogic practice that relates to physical energy and effort. Anything that involves resistance, physical, and pranic. So when you engage muscles, that's Hatha Yoga. When you engage a bandha, any of the bandhas, that's Hatha Yoga. When you do a breathing technique, the lungs are working. That's a physical process that's happening. That's Hatha Yoga. When you breathe in physical air and physical air's counterpart, which is prana, that's Hatha Yoga. When you focus your eyes and practice drishti, the physical eyes being focused on an object is Hatha Yoga. Any asana that you practice, whether it's siddhasana, lotus pose, sukhasana, Shirshasana, headstand, Viparita Karani, legs up the wall, warrior, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Actually, no, I don't think there's a warrior 8, but warrior 1, 2, or 3. Hatha Yoga. Shavasana, laying down, Hatha Yoga. A yin practice, Hatha Yoga. A vinyasa practice, Hatha Yoga. An ashtanga vinyasa practice, Hatha Yoga. A kriya, whether it's mental in the mind, moving energy with just your thoughts, Hatha Yoga, or a physical kriya where you're moving your body in a rhythmic motion, Hatha Yoga. Mudra, connecting parts of the body into a shape that creates a seal of energy, a circuit of energy. Hatha Yoga, the 6 Shatkriyas, or cleansing techniques spoken about in the scriptures, whether it's the swallowing a towel and pulling it back up, Nadi Shodhana, Kapalabhati breathwork, the neti pot, the yogic enema, Hatha Yoga. Okay, what's not Hatha Yoga? Pure meditation is not Hatha Yoga. Chanting mantra is considered to be a different school of yoga. Using the mind to contemplate and create and invent and solve problems is considered to be a different school of yoga. Worship of a deity is not Hatha Yoga. And doing good for the world is considered to be not Hatha Yoga. There are names for those other schools as well, which I'll elaborate on. With that being said, I hope that you have a different understanding of what the word refers to. We'll go more into the history of it and some of the additional specifics of it in just a moment. Let's address why certain yoga classes might be labeled as Hatha Yoga. In the modern day, we have tremendous amount of yoga options at studios, right? So many different types of classes. So many different types of additions to classes too, like goats, wine, laughter, hugging. There's hug yoga, cacao. Anything you can imagine basically is combined with yoga these days. So why would a physical yoga class be called Hatha Yoga? Well, the connotation of what Hatha refers to has evolved. The definition of words over time in any language do evolve, and words do change meaning over time. And so that might actually be what's happening with this word Hatha Yoga. It's evolving right in front of us into, now this is my opinion, you may have a slightly different opinion of why certain physical classes are called Hatha Yoga. But what it's evolved into is a physical practice that is less vinyasa based and more statically held posture based. I'll say again, according to the ancient scriptures and the philosophy of yoga, we already discussed that Hatha Yoga refers to anything that involves physical resistance. I mentioned vinyasa. So anytime you do a sun salutation, anytime you do a chaturanga or a downward dog, that's Hatha Yoga. Okay? Anytime you do any pranayama, that's Hatha Yoga. So I'm saying that, and then now how the word has evolved. It's evolved and used in reference to a yoga practice that has less vinyasa foundation to it. In other words, fewer sun salutations, if any, fewer movements with the breath transitioning between postures, if any, a pose that you move into and you hold and you breathe in the pose, and then you come out of the pose and you stop. Either you go back to a standing mountain Tadasana or Samastahiti, or if you're on the ground, maybe a Dandasana, and then you move into the second pose and you hold it and you breathe, and you come out of that pose and you stop. I'll also say that Bikram Yoga was the first type of class that did this, that was mainstream. Bikram Yoga was the first type of physical class that you could go to a studio and you'd recognize the name, that was a non-vinyasa yoga class. I'm calling these types of classes that are less vinyasa based or no vinyasa at all in the class, I'm going to call them static posture classes. Other names for them have been used and are used, like set series classes, set sequence class, and all the other variants of the post Bikram empire that you can imagine that are still being used, like Hot 26, original Hot Yoga, 26 and 2. Let's see, what else? Hot Hatha. The reason that those names came about is because when Bikram Chowdhury was indicted and found guilty on multiple counts of sexual assault and misconduct, I'm not sure which year those verdicts came down. I think maybe 2016 or something, 15, maybe earlier. Watch the Netflix documentary and you can see that. Studios and teachers wanted to dissociate themselves with the name Bikram. So they either kept teaching the exact same thing and just changed the name to one of those, or they modified the series a little bit, modified the class a little bit, and then called it something else. And you can go to almost any hot yoga studio, and there will be a version of this. At True Fusion, we have True Signature. It can be argued that True Signature has a couple of vinyasas in it, and maybe it does, but it's mostly a static posture class. There are no sun salutations. There are no chaturangas. Back when Vegas Hot was around, they had the Venus series, and now Venus is being taught at, I believe, 103 Yoga. There are countless others. There's A and B Yoga. Be aware that when a class is referred to as a set sequence or a set series class, they will usually intend to mean a class like this that's a heated variant of the Bikram sequence, which is 26 postures and 2 breathing exercises. But I don't believe that term is accurate either, because guess what? Ashtanga Vinyasa is a set sequence also, and that's all vinyasa. The foundation of Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga is moving with the breath, the exact opposite of statically held postures. Now, of course, also be aware that any vinyasa class that you go to, hopefully there will be some statically held postures. Hopefully that teacher will ask you to stay in the pose and breathe. So in Ashtanga Vinyasa, of course, there are many of those, many postures that you stay and breathe for 5 breaths. But linking those together is a vinyasa movement with breath and movement. And it's a set series, a set sequence. So that terminology, I don't think is accurate for the type of classes that the word Hatha Yoga is referring to. So I know this might be confusing, but I want to shed light on this so we can just understand what we've got in the yoga world here. And if you're a teacher, it's good to know these things. If you're a student, know what you're signing up for and know what you're talking about when you talk about these different schools of yoga. All right, let's take a breather here. If you have comments or questions about what we've discussed so far, I'm very, very curious to hear them. So please put them in the comment section below. Let's talk a little bit more about the history of it and where the term comes from. If you've done a yoga teacher training with me, you will recognize this document here, this Schools of Yoga document. This document will also be part of the course curriculum in the upcoming online course that I'm prepping to release soon on yoga philosophy. So according to the Vedas, which is the exhaustive body of sacred, religious, and secular philosophical texts in India, according to the Vedas, which means wisdom and knowledge, there are 6 Orthodox schools of thought, schools of philosophy. And one of the sacred schools of thought in ancient Hindu culture is yoga, one of the 6. And then yoga is further delineated into 6 schools as well. So the 6 Orthodox schools of yoga are as follows. And this might be a complete surprise to you, which I hope it kind of is. It gives some insight into the ancient and different intention of what yoga was and what it's evolved into. So the first of the 6 schools of yoga is Hatha Yoga. Now, we can also call this school of yoga Tantra Yoga. And the reason that we can call it Tantra Yoga is because they really mean the same thing. So for the first part of this video that you've already watched, we've elaborated on how Hatha Yoga is anything that requires force and resistance. Well, what propels anything to move in the world? And what propels anything to resist it? Prana does. What propels the mind to think? What propels thoughts to exist? What initiates any type of creativity? It's prana. So Tantra Yoga is the movement and manipulation and cultivation of prana. That's what Tantra Yoga is at a very, very basic sense. There's much more to be said about the school of Tantra Yoga and how that evolved separately. But for our purposes here, Hatha Yoga and Tantra Yoga are approximately interchangeable. And sometimes Tantra is referred to as Tantric Hatha Yoga. Tantric Hatha Yoga. Learning to control, learning to understand our energy, learning to move it, to heal ourselves and heal others with it. If you're a Reiki practitioner, you're using prana. When you send healing thoughts to others, the thoughts move with prana. Now, that's one of the 6 schools of classic yoga philosophy. We can also make another delineation underneath that first school before we go to the second school of yoga. And we can say that Kundalini Yoga, along with Laya Yoga and Kriya Yoga, and of course they're here and you can read about them here, are also subsets of Hatha Tantra Yoga, Hatha or Tantra Yoga. And now when I say Kundalini, let's be clear that I'm talking about the ancient practice of Kundalini Yoga, not the modern day brand name of Kundalini Yoga that Yogi Bhajan created in the late 1960s with the 3HO organization. So let's make the distinction between the ancient practice of Kundalini activation and raising of the Kundalini energy, and then the modern day brand name of a specific type of practice. It's different. Okay. So Laya Yoga, which refers to the dissolution, so dissolving societal beliefs, dissolving negativity, dissolving so we can be pure. And then Kriya Yoga, which is also a technique of moving energy. So all of this really is under the heading of Hatha Yoga or Tantric Hatha Yoga. All right, so that's I'll also say about Hatha Yoga that in addition to moving energy, there is a very distinct intention behind this practice of physical things in yoga, of moving the body, of breathing, of bandhas, of breath retention. It's to heal ourselves physically and energetically. It's to strengthen ourselves, to heal, strengthen, immunize, create a proper, fit vessel for spirit to live in and move through and operate in the world with. So it's preparatory. Hatha Yoga, Tantra Yoga is preparatory in nature for the higher, deeper work of spiritual growth. And the major texts that teach Hatha Yoga, there are a few of them. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika is one of the major ones. And this was compiled by the yogi Swatmarama, who was from the Nath lineage, one of the yogic lineages in India, around 1300 AD. Now, the practices have been practiced for longer than anyone knows. There are even carvings and paintings of asanas in the Egyptian pyramids and in other ancient cultures. But the compilation of this was put together around 1300. There's another one called the Garanda Samhita. It's also sutra-based. And the author has transliterated and translated the sutras from the Garanda Samhita. So there was another wise teacher named Garanda, and Samhita means his exposition or his teaching on physical yoga, on Hatha Yoga. And there are a couple of others as well. All right, now with all that being said, what's the second school of classic yoga philosophy and practice? Karma Yoga. That's a school of yoga, Karma Yoga. And this has nothing to do with postures and classes. This has nothing to do with going to a yoga studio and signing up for a class from a teacher. Karma Yoga involves our actions in life. It involves our motives in life. It involves how we view ourselves in the greater context of the human family on earth and the all-life family on earth. How do we treat plants and animals? How do we treat the planet itself? How do we treat other humans? Do we believe that our actions come back to us and affect us? And do we believe that our thoughts come back to us and affect us? That's Karma Yoga. And enlightenment can be achieved through any of these schools, by the way. The third Orthodox school of yoga, Bhakti. Now, Bhakti is spelled B-H-A-K-T-I, and it's if I was a Sanskrit scholar, it would be something like Bhakti, Bhakti, because that H is an aspirational sound, yoga. And this is the yoga of devotion, the yoga of worship. So anyone who practices a religion, who worships a deity, Jesus Christ, the Holy Father, Mother Teresa, Muhammad, Krishna, that's Bhakti Yoga. That's the worship of a deity because the mind is focused. And this is a type of union. Now, I haven't mentioned this yet, but the word yoga literally means to unify, unity, unionize, combine our lower self with our higher self, and then our higher self with the all self. If religious practice isn't doing that, I don't know what religion is then. That's Bhakti Yoga. That's a form of yoga, worshiping. Then we have Jnana or Jnana yoga. Now we have another diacritical mark. I did mention the tilde earlier. We have a tilde over the N, which is a Ñ sound, and the macron over the A is a long A, so Jnana yoga. And this is the yoga of thought and intellect. So the scientist, the inventor, the writer, the creator, the architect, the contemplative person. This is a type of yoga as well, because through this focus and stillness of using the mind, there's a higher power at work there. That's a school of yoga. Mantra yoga, this is the fifth. So mantra yoga is the yoga of chanting, whether it's audible with vocal cords or it's silent. And you might be familiar with a mala. A lot of mantra practice, mantra japa, typically uses a mala, but doesn't have to, of course. And when you chant, again, audibly or mentally, a mantra and pass a bead over your finger and do it again and do it again and do it again, this is mantra yoga. This is unifying ourselves to our higher self and then to the all self through the vibrational sound quality of mantra. And the specific mantras or prayers, or even call them affirmations that are used, are created with certain vibrational qualities to invoke, to evoke, bring forth the qualities into the physical world that the mantras embody. It's a very powerful practice. Anytime you say a prayer, that's mantra yoga. And then we come to the sixth school, which is my life study, basically, Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga. And Raja means royal or kingly or princely. Raja Yoga is said to be the royal yoga because although enlightenment can be achieved through the other schools, they all must culminate in Raja Yoga. They all must. It's said that we can't go all the way to the pinnacle of spiritual growth and advancement of humanity without a masterful grasp on Raja Yoga. And this is the yoga of the mind. This involves very little physical effort, very little breath work. It's mainly understanding the lower psyche and the higher mind and the soul, and doing that through achieving dominion over your mind, rather than letting the monkey mind control our lives. And the major text that describe Raja Yoga, that teach Raja Yoga, is, of course, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And Patanjali, it's debatable when he actually compiled them. Many scholars will say it was 200 BC approximately. Some put him after Christ. Some say that he compiled the Yoga Sutras much earlier than that, like 10,000 BC. But it stands to reason from my studies that the Buddha was active 500 BC, created Buddhism, and then Patanjali, 300 years after the Buddha, compiled his teaching of Raja Yoga. I like to show students that Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga are the bookends to the whole philosophy. The physical part, which is Hatha, and the mental part, which is Raja. And then all the others in between. And if we have a proficient grasp on both Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga, we're rocking and rolling. We're moving up the path of spiritual development. We do our physical practices. We understand our prana. We understand how to make our body healthy, whole, strong, immunized, healed, a fit vessel for prana and spirit to flow through. And then we practice our meditation and understand our wants, needs, our ego, our desires, our emotions, our jealousies, our excitements. And we learn to rise above all of that and see our lives from an astronaut's perspective and understand that drama seems like it's all powerful and all encompassing sometimes. It does. But if we see it from a different perspective, we realize that it's really not. I hope that helped shed some light on what Hatha Yoga is. Thanks for listening. Namaste.